this episode, we're going to focus on how to build AI security awareness training that actually sticks when people are busy, distracted, and trying to get work done. Many organizations run training as a one-time event that people click through, and then everyone acts surprised when risky behavior continues. The reason is simple. Information that is not connected to daily habits fades fast, especially when the topic feels abstract or technical. Artificial intelligence, AI, makes this challenge sharper because the tools are convenient, the outputs feel confident, and the risks are often invisible until damage has already occurred. The AI Security Manager, AAISM, mindset is to treat training as a control that shapes behavior, not as a compliance checkbox. By the end, you should understand what makes training memorable, how to design it around real decisions people make, and how to build reinforcement so safe behavior becomes normal. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first step is to redefine what successful training looks like, because if success means only completion rates, you will get a program that changes nothing. Training that sticks changes behavior in specific, observable ways, such as fewer people pasting sensitive information into unapproved tools, more people reporting unsafe outputs quickly, and more managers asking the right questions before adopting new AI capabilities. That means training must be built around the moments where people make choices, not around a dictionary of terms. Beginners often assume training must teach everything, but effective training teaches the few behaviors that prevent the most harm, then reinforces them until they become automatic. This is especially important with AI because many risks come from normal habits, like copying content for convenience or trusting a fluent output without verification. A sticky program is therefore measured by reduced risky behavior and improved reporting, not by how many slides exist or how many minutes a course runs. When training is treated as a behavior program, the design becomes clearer and the results become meaningful. A strong training program starts by identifying the highest risk everyday behaviors and translating them into simple, memorable rules people can apply without thinking too hard. The riskiest behaviors are usually not advanced attacks. They are ordinary actions like including personal data in prompts, sharing outputs externally without review, using AI outputs as final decisions in high-impact situations, or connecting tools to data sources without approval. Training should make these behaviors visible because many people do not realize they are doing something risky. They are just trying to be efficient. The best programs choose a small number of core habits and repeat them consistently, rather than teaching dozens of rules that compete for attention. The goal is to reduce guesswork by giving people a clear default, such as when to use approved tools, when to avoid sensitive data, and when to escalate questions. Beginners should notice that clarity beats completeness, because clarity produces action, while completeness often produces fatigue. When you focus on the behaviors that matter most, you create training that people actually remember. To make training stick, you need to connect the content to the learner's real job context, because people do not remember what feels unrelated to their work. This does not require technical deep dives, but it does require examples that match what employees actually do, such as writing customer responses, summarizing documents, brainstorming ideas, or analyzing trends. If training uses unrealistic scenarios, learners will treat it as a game, not as guidance. In AI security, the best examples show how a small mistake can scale, like a single copied customer record becoming part of a stored prompt history or an unverified output being forwarded to a client as if it were confirmed. Beginners often think fear is the best motivator, but fear without practical action tends to create avoidance and hiding. A better approach is to show a realistic situation, explain the risk in plain language, and then show the safe alternative that keeps work moving. When training mirrors real tasks, learners can map the guidance to their daily decisions, and that is how memory becomes habit. Another essential ingredient is simplicity of language, because people cannot apply what they cannot understand quickly. Training that sticks avoids dense jargon and focuses on plain explanations, such as describing prompts as messages that may be saved and describing outputs as suggestions that can be wrong. It also explains why a rule exists in a sentence or two, because understanding the why helps people handle edge cases without guessing. For example, a rule about avoiding sensitive data in unapproved tools becomes easier to follow when the learner understands that the organization may not control retention or access in those tools. Beginners sometimes confuse simplicity with lack of rigor, but in practice, simple language is a strength because it reduces misunderstanding. A rigorous program is one where expectations are unambiguous and enforceable, not one where the wording is complicated. Training also benefits from consistent phrases repeated across modules, because repetition builds recall. When the same few safety rules are expressed the same way every time, learners stop debating interpretation and start applying the habit. Training that sticks also builds the skill of recognizing risk, not just memorizing rules, because new AI tools and new features will appear and employees will need judgment. A practical approach is to teach people to ask a small set of questions before using an AI tool, such as whether the data is sensitive, whether the tool is approved, whether the output could cause harm if wrong, and whether the result will be shared outside the team. These questions are not a checklist to slow people down. They are a mental filter that prevents automatic risky behavior. Beginners often assume only security teams need this filter, but in reality, everyone who touches AI tools makes risk decisions. Training should also teach that uncertainty is normal and that pausing to ask is a sign of professionalism, not a sign of incompetence. This matters because AI tools create a false sense of safety, and people can be tempted to treat them as harmless. When training focuses on recognition and judgment, it remains useful even as tools change, which is exactly what you want in a fast-moving environment. A key reason AI awareness training fails is that it is delivered once and then forgotten, so sticky programs build reinforcement into the rhythm of work. Reinforcement can be short refreshers, brief reminders tied to common workflows, or periodic prompts that reintroduce the core rules without overwhelming people. The important idea is spacing, meaning people see the same messages again after time passes, because memory strengthens through repeated retrieval. A single long training session often produces the illusion of learning, but without reinforcement, behavior does not change reliably. Beginners should also understand that reinforcement works best when it is varied, such as using different examples to teach the same rule, because variety helps learners recognize the concept in new contexts. Reinforcement should not feel like punishment or nagging, because that creates resistance. It should feel like normal operational guidance, the same way an organization reminds people about safety procedures in other domains. When reinforcement is built into the program, safe behavior stops being a special event and becomes part of everyday work. To make training feel relevant, it helps to segment training by audience, because different roles face different AI risks and need different depth. Executives and managers need training that emphasizes accountability, approval thresholds, and what questions to ask before greenlighting a use case. General staff need training focused on safe data handling, acceptable use boundaries, and verification habits for outputs. Technical teams need training focused on change control, monitoring expectations, and evidence requirements, because they implement and operate controls. Beginners often think one training module should fit everyone, but that usually leads to content that is either too shallow for some groups or too dense for others. Segmentation does not mean creating completely separate programs. It means using a shared core set of rules and tailoring the examples and responsibilities to the learner's context. This also improves buy-in because people feel the training respects their time and speaks to their reality. When training is role-aware, it drives behavior more effectively and reduces the feeling that security guidance is generic and disconnected. Another ingredient that makes training stick is teaching the organization's actual processes, especially escalation paths, because safe behavior depends on knowing what to do when something feels wrong. People need to know who owns an AI system, how to report an unsafe output, and how to request approval for a new use case without getting stuck. If training teaches rules without teaching the path to follow, learners will be forced back into guessing. In AI contexts, reporting matters because unsafe outputs, data exposure, or misuse patterns can be detected early by users if the reporting process is clear and safe to use. Training should also normalize reporting by explaining that early reporting prevents harm and helps improve controls, rather than framing reporting as admission of wrongdoing. Beginners should notice that this is a cultural control as much as a procedural one, because people will not report issues if they fear blame. A sticky training program therefore treats escalation and reporting as normal professional behavior, like reporting a safety issue in any workplace. When people know the path, they act quickly instead of hiding mistakes, which reduces real-world risk. Training that sticks also addresses the psychology of AI, because human trust in confident outputs is a major risk driver. People tend to believe a fluent answer, especially when it is delivered quickly and sounds certain, and that can lead to harmful decisions when the output is wrong. A good training program teaches a simple posture. Treat outputs as drafts or suggestions. Verify when impact is meaningful, and never rely on an output as the final word in high-impact contexts. Verification does not need to be described as a complex process, but it should be framed as normal professional practice, like checking a source or confirming a number before sending it to a customer. Training should also explain that AI can be confidently wrong, and that it may invent details or misunderstand context, which is why human judgment remains essential. Beginners sometimes assume that improving accuracy solves this, but even accurate systems can fail in unexpected ways, especially when inputs are unusual. This is why training must focus on habits, not just on trust levels. When people learn to verify and to challenge outputs appropriately, the organization reduces both operational error and reputational harm. Another important dimension is teaching safe handling of outputs, because output risk is easy to overlook when people think risk only comes from input data. Outputs can contain sensitive information, can be misleading, and can be shared widely in seconds, which creates real exposure. Training should teach people to review outputs before sharing, to remove unnecessary sensitive details, and to avoid sending outputs externally without following normal review practices. It should also teach that outputs can become records, meaning they might be stored in tickets, documents, or chat logs, and those storage locations can expand access beyond what was intended. Beginners should understand that even if an input was safe, an output can still be risky if it gives inaccurate advice or reveals something that should not be public. Training should also address the temptation to copy and paste outputs into official communications without editing, because that can create a tone of certainty that the organization cannot defend later. A sticky program gives people a clear habit: treat outputs like content that needs review, not like verified facts. When output handling is taught explicitly, one of the biggest categories of AI misuse becomes easier to prevent. Training also needs to connect to governance expectations, because employees should understand that AI use is not just an individual choice. It is part of an organizational program with boundaries. This includes teaching that some use cases require approval, some data types require special handling, and some systems require ongoing monitoring and periodic review. When learners understand governance, they are less likely to treat rules as arbitrary and more likely to see them as a way to keep AI use sustainable. Beginners should also learn that governance is not only about saying no. It is about creating a clear, safe path to adoption, so teams can move quickly when risk is low and slow down when impact is high. Training should therefore include the idea of risk-based oversight in plain language, such as explaining that high-impact decisions need stronger checks. This reduces frustration because people can predict why certain projects face more scrutiny. Training that includes governance context makes it easier for employees to follow procedures and to respect thresholds without feeling blocked. When governance understanding improves, compliance becomes part of normal behavior rather than a late-stage obstacle. To ensure training sticks, you also need to measure whether it is working and adjust based on real signals rather than assumptions. Measurement can include trends in reported incidents or near misses, patterns of policy violations, completion and comprehension checks, and feedback from teams about where confusion remains. It can also include indicators like reductions in the use of unapproved tools or improvements in how quickly issues are escalated. Beginners should recognize that measurement is not just surveillance. It is feedback that helps the program become more effective and less annoying. If a certain rule is misunderstood repeatedly, that suggests the training needs clearer language or better examples. If a certain behavior persists, that may indicate that the safe alternative is too hard and the organization needs to improve processes or approve tools. Measurement should also be tied to leadership attention, because when leaders see clear signals, they can allocate resources to fix root causes rather than blaming individuals. A training program that measures and improves becomes more credible over time because it demonstrates that the organization learns and adapts. That continuous improvement loop is what makes awareness training a real control. Finally, training that sticks is reinforced by leadership behavior and organizational incentives, because people follow what leaders do more than what documents say. If leaders use unapproved tools casually or pressure teams to skip review for speed, training messages lose credibility immediately. If leaders reward safe escalation and treat reports as valuable signals rather than as trouble, employees will adopt safer habits more quickly. Training should therefore be paired with clear messaging from leadership that safe AI use is part of professional performance, not an optional extra. It should also be paired with processes that make safe behavior easier, such as predictable approval pathways and accessible guidance. Beginners should understand that training cannot compensate for a culture that punishes caution and rewards shortcuts. A mature AI security program aligns training, leadership, and process so the same message is reinforced from multiple directions. When this alignment exists, awareness training stops feeling like a separate activity and starts feeling like part of how work is done. That is the point where training truly sticks. As we wrap up, building AI security awareness training that sticks is about designing for behavior change, not for completion certificates. Effective training defines success as reduced risky behavior and improved reporting, then teaches a small set of high-impact habits using plain language and realistic work examples. It builds risk recognition skills so learners can make safe decisions even as tools evolve, and it reinforces learning through spaced repetition that fits the rhythm of daily work. It segments content by role so responsibilities and examples match real decision points, and it teaches clear escalation paths so uncertainty leads to safe action rather than guessing. It addresses the psychology of trusting confident outputs by teaching verification habits and safe output handling, and it ties everyday behavior back to governance boundaries and risk-based oversight. It measures outcomes and improves continuously, and it is reinforced by leadership behavior and usable processes that make safe choices the easy choices. When you can describe training in this way, you are thinking like an AAISM who understands that people are part of the system and that the strongest controls are the ones that shape daily habits reliably.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.